Hey there, welcome back to my kitchen. Today's video is going to be a little bit different than usual. We're going to have a little slow cooker marathon today, and I'm going to share with you 12 great slow cooker recipes. All of these recipes have been shared on my channel before, but if you're new around here, you most likely haven't seen some of these. A lot of these are from my very first year sharing recipes, so let's go ahead and get started, and I will show you 12 amazing crockpot recipes. Kicking off this marathon, the first thing we're going to be making is this jalapeno popper chicken. To begin, I have 2 jalapeno peppers that I went ahead and washed and removed the seeds from. After removing the seeds, you'll just go ahead and chop those into smaller pieces. Now into this bowl here, I combined 4 ounces of room temperature cream cheese along with half a cup of shredded mild cheddar cheese. Since I'm using a smaller bowl, I'm going to go ahead and just combine the cheese and the cream cheese together before doing anything else. But after those are mixed together, then you can go ahead and add about 3/4 of your jalapenos. You do just want to reserve a couple jalapenos for the end. Moving over here to my crock pot, in the very bottom, I'm going to go ahead and add 3 chicken breasts. On top of the chicken breasts, you're just going to season those with 1.5 teaspoons of taco seasoning, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, and 1 teaspoon of onion powder. Next, you'll take the cream cheese and jalapeno mixture and you'll add that right over top of the 3 chicken breasts. Just make sure to spread it out evenly over the top. Go ahead and add the lid on top, and then this is going to cook for about 3 to 3.5 hours until the chicken is reaching 165 degrees in the thickest part. Once the chicken is fully cooked, then over the top you're going to add 1 more cup of shredded mild cheddar cheese. Add the lid back on and just give this about 10 minutes to let that cheese melt. Once the cheese has melted, then over the top you'll want to add a couple slices of cooked and chopped bacon, the rest of your jalapenos, and 2 chopped up green onions. Once the chicken was done, I went ahead and served mine over some cheesy cauliflower rice, and then my husband had his over some cheesy 4-cheese rice-a-roni rice. Now we're going to make these super easy, amazing 3-ingredient ribs. First thing you're going to want to do is my least favorite part about ribs is remove that membrane from the back. I played around with this for about 10 minutes before I actually got it off, so it can be a little difficult sometimes. Usually I'll have my husband do it for me, but he wasn't here. So make sure you remove that from the back. It'll help make your ribs a lot more tender. If you want to, you can cut these ribs in half to put in here and lay them flat. But for me personally, I just put the whole thing in there and bend it around just a little bit. It works perfectly fine. Now go ahead and cover these with your favorite barbecue sauce. I'm adding in about half a bottle of barbecue sauce to start, and then we'll add the rest later on. Next, I'm adding in 2 cans of Dr. Pepper. Soda acts as an amazing tenderizer when you make crockpot ribs, so that's why we're using that Dr. Pepper. If you don't have Dr. Pepper, you can also use Coca-Cola. I went ahead and added my lid on here, and I cooked this on a low heat for about 8.5 hours. Halfway through, I did come in the kitchen and just flip them over. That way the other side could be down in that liquid as well. But now at this point, they are falling off the bone, so now we need to just transfer them over to a baking sheet. As you can see, they are falling off the bone right now, so very carefully I'm just transferring this over to a foil lined baking sheet. They did fall apart a little bit on the end. You can see the bone started coming out. I just tried to piece it back together, and now we're going to go ahead and cover this with even more barbecue sauce. On top of this, I added probably close to 1/3 of the bottle of barbecue sauce, and then just using a brush, you're going to want to make sure you cover the tops and the sides the best you can. These ribs went in the oven at 400 degrees for about 10 to 15 minutes until that barbecue sauce on the top turned into a really nice sticky glaze. If you don't care about having a glaze on top, then you can skip the oven, but trust me, this extra step makes them even better. As we picked these up off the tray, they were literally falling off the bone, which was amazing. They turned out so delicious and they were very flavorful for only adding 2 ingredients on them. And then I went ahead and made some Bob Evans macaroni and cheese on the side, making this entire meal only 4 ingredients. Next up, we're going to make some slow cooker mashed potatoes. To begin, I'm just going to go ahead and peel and cube up about 2.5 pounds of potatoes. Add the potatoes into the crock pot along with about half a cup of chicken broth. If you don't like chicken broth, you can also use water, but the chicken broth does help add some extra flavor. Go ahead and add the lid and let this cook on high for about 2 hours. Once my potatoes were soft, I just took a potato masher and mashed those right there in the crock pot. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and just make my mashed potatoes how I normally do, so you can add whatever you want. For me, I like to add a couple tablespoons of butter, some milk or half and half, about 1/4 cup of sour cream, and then I season it with salt, pepper, garlic powder, and parsley. After I've added in everything I want, I will get it mixed up, give it a taste, and then if it needs anything extra, I'll go ahead and add that in as well. Once you've got the potatoes where you want them, you can add the lid and keep these on warm for a couple of hours. This method is great for holidays when you already have a lot of things cooking in the oven and on the stovetop. You can set this aside in a crock pot and just not worry about it. Now we're going to make these hot honey chicken crock pot sandwiches. Into my crock pot, I'm adding in 2 chicken breasts with a 1/2 tablespoon of cayenne pepper, 1/2 teaspoon of smoked paprika, 1/2 teaspoon of garlic salt, 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, and 1/2 cup of honey. When adding honey like this, the best thing you can do is take some nonstick spray, spray the inside of your measuring cup, and then add the honey in. That way when you go to pour the honey into the crock pot, it slides right out of the measuring cup and you're not leaving any honey behind. Next, you'll need to add 1/2 tablespoon of vinegar and 3 tablespoons of unsalted butter. Once everything is in the crock pot, go ahead and just try to mix this the best you can. It does not have to be perfect at this point. Add your lid on and then go ahead and cook this on a low heat for about 4.5 to 5 hours. When your time is up, here is what the chicken should be looking like. At this point, the chicken should fall apart pretty easily and the smell will be pretty strong. Go ahead and try to remove the chicken from the crock pot. If you need to, you can shred it right there in the crock pot, but I like to pull mine out and do it on a plate so I can get it a little bit more fine. But once everything is shredded, go ahead and just add it right back into the crock pot, give it a really good mix together, and let that chicken begin to soak up some of those juices. To serve this, I just added it onto a brioche bun along with some sweet relish. I like to add that sweet relish on there. It really helps to tone down the heat of the chicken and balance everything out. Next up, we're moving on to this easy chicken stroganoff. Into the bottom of the crock pot, I'm going to add in 6 boneless, skinless chicken thighs that I did trim all the extra fat off of. Next, add in 1 10-ounce can of cream of chicken soup, 1 packet of zesty Italian dressing mix, 1 package of sliced mushrooms, 1 8-ounce package of cream cheese, and I did go ahead and cube that so I can mix it together a bit easier, 2 tablespoons of butter, and a half teaspoon of black pepper. I did go ahead and partially mix this at this point. I almost forgot my last couple ingredients, but you'll also need to add in 1 tablespoon of minced garlic and 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. Once again, mix that up really well, add the lid, and let this cook on a low heat for about 5 hours. Once my time was up, I went ahead and removed all the chicken thighs out of the crock pot and began shredding those up using 2 forks. Once you have those shredded up really well, you can go ahead and add those back into the crock pot. Just add the lid and let that sit there for a few minutes while you prepare your noodles. For this recipe, I did cook about 8 ounces of egg noodles. This is 16 ounces in this bag, so I only used half of the bag. Drain off all the water from the noodles once they're done cooking and add them straight into the crock pot. Give this a really good mix, and at this point you will need to taste it, and you'll probably need to add some more salt and pepper. Add as much as you need so that you like it for your family. Here is what your bowl should end up looking like when it's all done. This is a very simple dinner. You can really whip it together really quickly. It's also very filling and can feed a lot of people. You can also make some things to go along on the side, like some garlic bread or just bread and butter, or even a salad. Next up, we're making a hidden veggie chicken enchilada soup. Into your crock pot, go ahead and add in 2 chicken breasts, half of an onion that I went ahead and chopped up, half of a cup of shredded carrots, half a cup of chopped celery, 1 bell pepper chopped up. I am using an assortment of colors, but you can use red, orange, or yellow, 1 tablespoon of minced garlic, and then for the seasonings you'll need 2 teaspoons of cumin, 2 teaspoons of oregano, 1.5 tablespoons of chili powder. Next you'll need to add a 1/4 cup of tomato paste, 1 10-ounce can of diced tomatoes with green chilies, along with 4 cups of low sodium chicken broth. Do your best to try to give this a little bit of a mix. Add the lid and let this cook on a high heat for about 3 to 4 hours. Now that the chicken is cooked all the way through, I'm just going to remove that and add it to a separate plate for right now. Now I'm taking my immersion blender and adding that in here. This is going to blend this soup up so it is nice and smooth. But if you don't have an immersion blender, you could also just add this into a regular blender. This soup is perfect if you have little kids that absolutely hate to eat their vegetables. You can easily hide them in here, and somebody that actually hates their vegetables is my husband, but I can get him to eat multiple bowls of this soup. Now this step is optional, but we do prefer a thicker soup, so I am taking 2 tablespoons of cornstarch, mixing that with just a little bit of water, adding that into my crock pot and giving it a good mix together. Now you can add in 1 can of mixed chili beans, half a cup of frozen corn, or more if you want, we just don't like a lot. And last but not least, I'm just going to go ahead and shred up this chicken and add it back into the crock pot. Now that everything is in the crock pot, I am just going to let this cook for about 1 more hour to let the corn and beans get nice and hot. Once everything is warmed through, go ahead and give it a taste. At this point, you can adjust the seasonings. I'm just adding some salt and pepper. Here's what your bowl should look like when it's finished. I personally like to top mine with some avocado, cheese, sour cream, and jalapenos. Overall, this soup is pretty healthy. If you just leave out the cheese and sour cream, it would be even better. But if you are trying to get your kids just to get a little bit more vegetables in their diet, this is perfect for that. You will never know they're in there. You can easily hide the taste, especially with more seasonings and toppings. Next up, we're going to make this cozy and comforting mushroom and onion crock pot roast. To begin with this one, you'll need to slice up 1 package of mushrooms along with half of a yellow onion. Moving over to my crock pot, I'm adding 1 cup of water into the bottom along with the mushrooms and onions we just cut up. And then on top of those, I'm just going to add a couple shakes of salt and pepper for right now. Now you can add in a chuck roast. Mine was about 3 pounds, and if you want to sear this first, you can do that, but I went ahead and skipped it on this day. To season this, I'm just using some salt, pepper, onion powder, Montreal steak seasoning, and some Badia Complete. There are no measurements, I'm just seasoning this pretty heavily and making sure to rub it in on each side of the roast. And finally, I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce over the top. Once you add the lid, you can let this cook on a low heat for about 7 to 8 hours, or even longer than that. Now, about a half hour after I put the lid on this, I did realize I forgot to add the minced garlic, so right now I'm just adding about 2 tablespoons of minced garlic, and since I forgot to do this earlier with the mushroom and onion, I went ahead and just added it along the edges. Here's my roast when it was all done. I did remove it from the crock pot so I could easily shred it on the plate, even though it was falling apart, but I wanted to remove all the excess fat from it. Now we're going to go ahead and make some gravy with the drippings from the roast. Into this pan, I'm melting a half stick of butter and then adding in a 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour. You will need to whisk this together and let this flour cook for about 2 minutes or so. Next, slowly you're going to start pouring in about 2 cups of the drippings from the crock pot. Just make sure you're adding a little at a time, whisking each time as well. I gave that gravy a few minutes to thicken up, and then I added in some mushroom and onion from the crock pot into the gravy. You will need to taste this and adjust the salt and pepper to your liking. Here's what my plate looked like in the end. I did make some mashed potatoes to go along with this as well, and then I poured the gravy over the roast and the mashed potatoes. This meal is one of my favorite comfort meals. It is so delicious, especially in the winter. My husband is not a big roast fan, especially if I add carrots and stuff, so I made this one for him to try, and we both absolutely loved it. Next up, we're making this soy sauce honey chicken and veggies. Using a measuring cup, I'm going to add in a 1/2 cup of low sodium soy sauce or coconut aminos, along with a 1/2 cup of honey and a 1/4 cup of ketchup. And then for the seasonings, I'm adding a 1/2 teaspoon of basil, 1/2 teaspoon of oregano, a 1/4 teaspoon of red pepper flakes, and a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. Last but not least, you'll add in 2 teaspoons of minced garlic and then just stir this and set it aside. Next, you'll need to take 6 larger red potatoes. I did wash these really well, and now I'm just going to quarter all of these. Finally, over to my crock pot, I am adding in 6 boneless, skinless chicken thighs that I did trim the fat off of. On top of the chicken, add the potatoes and 1 bag of baby carrots. Now take the sauce that we made earlier and just pour this over everything in the crock pot. I added my lid and let this cook on a low heat for about 6 to 6.5 hours. At this point, everything should be soft and fork tender, and now you're going to add about a ½ pound of fresh green beans over the top. Be sure to clean those and cut the ends off, and then you'll just stir this in and let this go for about 1 more hour. Overall, this was the first time I ever made this meal specifically. It was really good, but next time I made it, I would probably double the sauce just because I would like it to be a bit more saucy. And I did end up adding some red pepper flakes over top of mine for some extra heat. Next up, we're making this amazing chocolate lava cake. Starting off in a mixing bowl, I'm adding 1 box of chocolate cake mix along with 1 box of chocolate pudding, 3 eggs, 1 1/4 cup of milk, ½ a cup of vegetable oil, and last but not least, a ½ cup of sour cream. I know that sounds weird, but just trust the process. Go ahead and get that mixed together. Don't forget to scrape along the edges and the bottom to pick up anything that was left behind. This is the most important part of this recipe. You'll need to take some nonstick spray and spray down the inside of your crock pot super well, and then you can add in your cake mix. Be sure to spread that out as evenly as you can in the bottom of the crock pot. Next, you're going to need a bag of chocolate chips. This one is semi-sweet. I'm going to take this and sprinkle it evenly over the top of the cake mix. Add the lid and turn this to a low heat and let this go for about 2.5 to 3 hours. Just in case, I went ahead and included this clip in here just so you could see the exact ingredients I used in this recipe. Here's what it should be looking like when it's all done. To check for doneness, you can go ahead and take your utensil, a spoon or a fork, whatever you're using. Stick it into the center, and as long as it has this crumbly look to it, it is good to go. This recipe is definitely best when eaten fresh and nice and hot. This is how I chose to eat mine, just plain as is. I think it's good this way. However, my husband likes to eat his with some vanilla ice cream over the top. Next up, we're making some BBQ meatballs in the slow cooker. To begin, I'm just adding about a ½ cup of barbecue sauce into the bottom of my slow cooker. You can use any type of barbecue sauce that you like. You will also need to add 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika and 2 teaspoons of Worcestershire sauce. I'm just using my spoon to kind of mix all that together in the bottom. For this recipe, you can use homemade meatballs or frozen meatballs. Mine were actually homemade. I had them in the freezer, so I just pulled them out and added them into the slow cooker. The homemade meatballs do make this recipe turn out 10 times better, but if you don't have that or don't want to make them, you can buy frozen meatballs at the grocery store already prepared. For this recipe, I'm using 1 pound of homemade meatballs. I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head how much is in a frozen bag from the store, but for this recipe, I am using 1 pound of meatballs. I let these cook on a low heat for about 3 hours. They were nice and hot all the way through at this point. I just made sure they didn't need any more barbecue sauce, and then they were ready to go. I did add some toothpicks into mine just for easy grab and go, but you can leave these in the slow cooker for a longer period of time. I would just turn it to a low or a warm setting heat. If they do start to dry out a little bit, just add a little bit more barbecue sauce in there and they should be just fine. Next up is this delicious chicken and bacon tater tot casserole. To begin here in my skillet, I'm just adding in about half a package of bacon. I do like to slice mine in half, it's just easier to cook that way. You're going to go ahead and cook that and then chop that all up when it's all done. You're also going to need 2 chicken breasts, and mine are partially frozen, but that does make it a lot easier to chop them up. With this chicken, you just want to make sure it's all cut up into bite-sized pieces. Moving over to the slow cooker, I'm going to go ahead and take my non-stick spray and spray down the bottom and the sides of this super well. You do not want your tater tots to stick, so make sure you add plenty of that spray. Into the very bottom, you're going to add about 16 ounces of tater tots. Just make sure to spread these out so they're in a nice even layer. For this entire recipe, you're going to need 2 cups of cheese, but for now we're just going to add about 1/3 of this bag in here. On top of the cheese, you'll add about 1/3 of your bacon. Then you'll take the chicken that we cubed up and evenly place this over top of all of that into the slow cooker. I am going to season this chicken with 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of onion powder, 1 teaspoon of salt, and 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. Over top of the chicken, you'll add about another 1/3 of the bag of cheese. And then on top of the cheese, you'll add the rest of your tater tots. Again, make sure those are in a nice even layer. Then you'll use up the rest of the bacon and cheese over the top. And finally, to finish it off, we're adding about 2/3 cup of milk or 1/2 and 1/2. You're just going to drizzle that over the top, and I like to sprinkle some parsley over the top of mine as well. Add the lid and let this cook on a high heat for about 3 to 4 hours until your chicken is cooked all the way through. Here's what it looked like when it was all done. As you can see, the edges got just a little bit crispy, but they were nowhere near burnt. It'll scoop out really easily, and I did want to show you this is the only part that stuck for me was down in the very corners of the slow cooker. Here's what it looked like on my plate. I do like to serve this with broccoli and add some sour cream over the top. I personally think the sour cream completes this meal. I'm also not a tater tot fan, but I love this meal. All of this together, I actually don't mind the tater tots at all. And last but not least, we're going to make my chicken and noodles. I have shared this on my channel countless times, but it is delicious, so I'm sharing it again. Into the bottom of my crock pot, I'm adding in 1 pound of boneless, skinless chicken thighs. I did trim off the excess fat. Next, add in 32 ounces of low sodium chicken broth, 1 family-sized can of cream of chicken soup followed by 1 smaller one, and 1 stick of unsalted butter. Give that a mix and then add the lid. Let this cook on a high heat for about 4 to 4.5 hours until the chicken is cooked all the way through. Once the chicken is cooked, you'll just need to pull those out and set them on a plate so that you can shred them up. Once they are shredded, you can go ahead and just add that right back in. For the seasonings, you'll need to add a half teaspoon of garlic powder, a half teaspoon of pepper, and 1 teaspoon of salt. If this isn't enough seasoning for you, you can always adjust it later on in the recipe. At this time, you will also need 24 ounces of these Reams frozen egg noodles. Last but not least, we are going to take 4 tablespoons of cornstarch, add some liquid from the slow cooker into your bowl, mix that up, and then add it right back in there. This is going to help thicken everything up. Add your lid back on, and then you're going to let this cook for another 1.5 to 2 hours until it's thickened up and the noodles are nice and soft. This is one of those recipes that my husband is always asking for, and I made this over Easter and everyone devoured it. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to leave me a flower down in the comments below to let me know that you made it all the way through, and I will see you back here on Sunday. Bye!